Well, the world is a dumpster fire, and nothing here makes sense. And you vacillate between crippling fear and constant self-defense. And nothing's right and nothing's good, and you're paralyzed with grief. Don't kill yourself, just have a cup of coffee.
Welcome to Coffee Over Suicide, the dramedy podcast about mental illness and choosing life over death, one cup of coffee at a time. I'm your host, Chris Parker Howard. And today on the show, from scatteringhope.com, we have got Crystal Partney. Scattering Hope is a fantastic organization that she created to help families and other people deal with the loss of someone who's died by suicide. It's a cause that is near and dear to my heart, probably yours if you're here listening to this. You should go check it out. There's a lot of really cool stuff there. There's a free guide that you can get right off of the homepage. And we're going to get into this conversation in a minute. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who has found us on meetup.com and joined the Thursday meetup. We now have people from all over the world. You should join us. If you're listening to this right now, go to meetup.com, look for Coffee Over Suicide, and there is a Thursday meetup. There are two of them every Thursday, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. It's a good time. It's like group therapy without a therapist. So sometimes it's fun and people are having a great time, and sometimes people really got to be talked off a ledge, and we just help each other. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, amazing thing. Come be a part of it. Drop in for 20 minutes, see if you like it. You can also find that at coffeeoversuicide.com/talk. Now, another thing I want to address is the fact that the podcast episodes have been kind of erratic. Totally get it. I am going to school right now. I am working a full-time job, and I'm running the Thursday meetups, and I'm going to the gym, and I'm doing all kinds of things, just trying to improve my life. I've actually also got Coffee Over Suicide sponsoring a music festival in Saginaw, Michigan this summer. So I'll be taking part in that in some fashion as well. But enough of all that stuff. Let's get into this conversation. This is a really heavy conversation, but very rewarding. So if you can make it through a conversation that's pretty heavy, pretty steeped in talk about suicide and things of that nature, I think that you'll come out the other side feeling grateful that you stayed. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation with the great Crystal Partney. Crystal,
hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Where am I talking to you from?
You are talking to me from Utah.
Nice. What's the weather like right now? Is it snowy or?
Well, they say we have the greatest snow on earth, yet we don't have any snow. So it's really unusual lately. We've been warm, and it's just been a really crazy winter so far. But I will say that we desperately need some snow.
Well, there's something to just kind of being grateful for whatever kind of weather you've got at any given moment, and just sort of trying to find a way to lean into it. And I remember I'm in California now, but I'm originally from Michigan and then Colorado. And so that idea of, especially in Colorado, the snow would come and we'd have, several inches in the morning and it would be gone by the afternoon. So my relationship with snow in Colorado was very different than it was when I was in Michigan, which was it showed up either on Halloween or Thanksgiving, and then it was there until March.
Right.
Just snow all the time. So, a 6 of 1.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. You said Colorado because we lived in Colorado. Me and my husband lived in Colorado for a couple of years. So small world.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. You do find when you talk to people that there's always something that you've got in common. It's just, we're all just, ants in a colony. Just
we are
moving around.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it really is. So I know we're gonna take some deep dives into some pretty gnarly territory. But I think that it's important for me when we have these conversations that are a little serious, that we kind of represent the whole picture versus just the darkness, because I feel like when you just go into the darkness, you run the risk of presenting a picture of hopelessness, rather than maybe even just a situation where there's so much more going on, even if you're not always aware of it. So I'd like to start off by going back to the beginning of things. Tell me about what was your childhood like with your sister? Yeah,
well, it's a great way to start, honestly. So I grew up in a large family. I am the youngest of 8, and my sister Gina was the oldest daughter. And so it's it's kind of interesting. It's like an even split, if you will. It goes my 2 brothers, and then my sister Gina, and then 2 more brothers, and then my sister Rachel, and then my brother, and then me. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. So family gatherings, as you can imagine, having us all together was a little bit chaotic and fun, to say the least. Mm-hmm. But it was great. And I just remember like so many family gatherings, whether it was, family reunions, back in the day, those were a thing. And
yeah,
my dad was very, he grew up in a very tight knit family, and that was their thing. They did, hunting and fishing and what have you, it was just a very tight family. And it's one of the things that I remember about my childhood, and just, I love it. And it's so great even now that I have a family of my own, and allowing our daughter to, be around her cousins and just have fun like that, but have that free spirit. So it's good.
How did your parents manage to, take you places and
right?
without leashes? And that's because I've got 2 kids, 3 now, because one was inherited through my wife, but they're all adults now. But like when there were 2 of them, it was so hard to pay attention. And I grew up in a family with 2 sisters and a brother, so there was just 4 of us.
Yeah.
And even that, just trying to wrangle everybody, I can't even imagine the amount of love and patience that would have to go into that.
Oh, absolutely. I always joke. I tell everybody, I'm like, my mom's a saint. She wouldn't openly admit that, but she would have to be if she's raising 8 kids and the chaos that comes alongside of it. I laugh because my mom, talks about when, all of us were little, we, like, her only alone time, if you will, was my dad would come home from work. He owned his own business, so he would get off work, and then come home, and there was that kind of sweet spot before dinner, and he would gather up all the kids and we would go to the playground or wherever just to get out of the house. And that was like my mom's like kind of quiet time. And then when we all went to bed, she's a night owl, so she loved to stay up, but that was like her sanity time. So it's funny because, of course, I don't remember any of that, but she's like, yeah, that was like my time away from you guys. and it was like heavenly. So, and it's funny because my mom would joke, she's like, we never went out to eat. It was very rare because you can imagine trying to feed, 8 kids at a Chinese restaurant would be like insanity and impossible. So there was a lot of, if we did go out to eat, it was like buffet style, right? Because mom would be like, I don't care. You guys can get whatever you want and have as much as you want. And I don't have to worry about it. So it's just, again, it's part of the fun.
It's wonderful that you all had each other like that. It sounds like there's a lot of good times there.
Oh, absolutely. And again, my mom would joke too, because whenever I had a new baby at home, your dad would take all of you guys and go fishing in Montana. And it was like, and my sister Rachel jokes because she's like, yeah, I remember like going fishing with dad. And there was one time where he just had to go do something. And so we were all like playing near the water and we were all safe. But then this blow snake came up and was like, and so they were poking sticks at it, not knowing that it was extremely venomous. And
yeah,
but they were just kids, And the dad came back and it was just like, yep. And my sister, actually, funny story, my sister Gina, on a fishing trip, she managed to get a fishing lure. She hooked my dad in his thumb. And it must have been so bad, at least from what I've heard from the stories, that the fishing lure was stuck in there so bad when he went to the local doctor there, the clinic, he took it out for free because it was wedged in there so bad. But yeah, never a dull moment.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, tell me a little bit about Gina. What kind of personality was she in the mix of all of you? Because everybody starts to develop their own personalities in any family dynamic, people sort of start to fill roles.
Yes.
And you had a lot of people.
Yes.
And so where was Gina's niche in that?
Oh my goodness. She was full of just piss and vinegar. I mean, my mom was like, she was so feisty, and she was, she was not only oldest girl, but she had to like hold her own, because there were 2 older brothers, and so she had to hold her own in the midst of all this. And then, of course, my siblings came after, and so, which made it even more so that Gina had to like, hey, this is my territory. Like, I'm going to be, make my voice known and heard. And that's how my mom described her. And it's so true. Even, when I think about her, she was just this ball of energy, like the Energizer Bunny, like no slowing down. It was just go, go, go. And it was one of the things that I just absolutely loved about her.
So, and how did that manifest into adulthood? Because you take all that energy, people with that kind of energy can go a lot of different ways. What was her situation like kind of getting off into her own and going out into the world?
Well, it was definitely interesting to say the least. What I recognized too, especially towards the end of her life, is we all worked for my family-owned business, and it really showed up in her work ethic. And even before she passed, it showed up because she was just a go-getter. Like, there was no, like, whatever needed to be done, she would just do it. You wouldn't have to ask her to do something. Like, she would just notice a problem and she would go fix it. And she was constantly, like, just a helper and wanting to serve other people and be, like, active in her community, in her church, in our family, and, being married and having, 3 kids as well. Just a very active mom, very in her realm, in her space. And she was always like, she was so educated in the sense that it's like, I remember having my daughter and, being a new mom, I'm like, okay, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Nobody was, but where's the manual? There's no manual. But
right.
I remember her giving me a bunch of, like, children's books, and there were just these little tiny picture books, and she was just educating me on, on reading these to my daughter. And my daughter was really little, she was a newborn, but she says, go ahead and read these to her now, because when she gets older, she can use her fingers to open up the pictures so she can see, and that helps build dexterity. And so little things like that I was like, wow, okay. And she was just, so knowledgeable, and just, again, that fiery personality. No one was going to tell her no. No one was going to, you weren't going to, like, double cross Gina. Like, she was like, nope, this is how it is. And she was definitely, like, made her voice known. And again, it was really hard to, I would say, tame that down for her, especially because when she would get in different situations and she had to be calm or she had to be more reserved, that was really hard for her, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like she was a person that you could look at and think, man, she's really got something figured out here. It's kind of amazing and heartbreaking in a lot of ways, the way that we can look at other people and assign all of these ideas about who they are to us and what we think they are versus what they think they are, and the situation that they think they're in versus what we think they're in. And I think that these conversations are just sort of starting to creep into the mass consciousness. It's always been a thing that we've been discussing, particularly here in America, just getting to this idea of being able to talk about mental health things, and people having issues, even if they're, not like a clinical thing, like a depression or a bipolar or something like that, but situational. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a situation can come in and just hit you really, really hard and cause you to have a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
So what were the conversations about mental health like in your family growing up, and just kind of as you came into adulthood? What was your understanding of these things?
Well, it's interesting that you frame the question that way, because I think I should preface this by saying my parents did the best they could in regards
of course.
to, mental health and dealing with the only way that they knew how. And so it's easy to, look at it in today's context and say, oh, well, of course, going to see a therapist or going to see a counselor or whatever is beneficial to you is so natural now. But it wasn't when I was a kid. And it was this subject that nobody really wanted to talk about. It was kind of like the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it, but yet it's happening. And even just the word suicide, like you just didn't hear about it. It was something that I'm sure occurred, but it wasn't in like daily conversation or even around like the dinner table conversation. And so I think that mental health in general growing up was something that, my parents, they always had an open door policy is how I would describe it. You can, go to them for any issue. Nothing was off the table. And if you were struggling to, again, just make that known. But there was also, again, carrying that stigma forward and knowing like, okay, what's kind of off the table, what's off limits to talk about, and it really just depends on the family dynamic if you feel comfortable sharing those very intimate thoughts and those very intimate details about you and what you're experiencing and thinking about. But it was something that I would just say, like, it wasn't talked about. It was kind of a little bit taboo in my opinion, just because, yes, it was occurring, but we just didn't hear about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I say to people too, when they are in that kind of situation is I had a pretty unique situation myself where I was sort of I'm wired for it. I've got bipolar. And so I became very aware of that kind of feeling from the age of 5 years old. I was a little kid when my first thoughts of suicide entered my head. And my father was a substance abuse counselor. So he went through all of the levels of counseling and learning how to recognize these things. And we were also a very open family with, just being able to get into difficult things, but we never talked about it. And even when I went into the hospital, we didn't really talk about it. And I'm not really sure why. And I don't think that it was anything to do with a lack of love or a lack of information even. But I think that there was almost a level of fear when these things presented their ugly head into the room. There was a level of, I really don't want to speak its name because then it becomes real.
Right.
And hopefully we can just move straight to, how do we fix it? And not talk about how we got here. Can we not talk about how we got here? Because that's painful. And the people that I've lost to this thing as well. It's the same thing. It's a difficult conversation to have. And so that's why I think that it's very important that we start to have it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So tell me a little bit about how you discovered the passing of your sister Gina.
Yeah, it was the day before my birthday in 2019. I received a phone call that morning from my mom saying that she had taken her life. And as you can imagine, we were just completely devastated and heartbroken.
Yeah.
And that was not the conversation that I expected to have. We knew that my sister was struggling, and she was, newly divorced after being married for, close to, I want to say 2 decades. It might have been longer than that. And her children are, were in their teenage years, and they wanted to live with their dad, which he lives 3 hours away. And so I just remember having conversations with my sister and just watching her, struggle, being newly single and navigating the complexities of being a single mom and having her children choose to live with their dad. And really, that sounds kind of tragic, and it is tragic when I think about it, but not really wanting to spend time around her as often as I'm sure she would have liked, and as absolutely what she would have needed. But that morning, as you can imagine, getting the phone call from my mom and having her express that this tragedy was just absolutely devastating. We, as a family, were just desperate to get her the help that she needed. And she was seeing a therapist. She was on medication, but we later found out that she had stopped all of that completely. And so just leading up to her death, unknowingly, we had really thought she had turned a corner for the better, because she was back to her fiery self. And she would have these moments and we'd say, she's back. She's back. And it was kind of like this breath of fresh air, because like we had talked about in the beginning, where there was this period of darkness. And I kind of alluded to seasons where it's like, and I would tell her this, I'm like, Gina, this is just a season. This isn't going to last forever. This is just a season, and we need to, come together as a family and help you and support you in any way that we can, so that you can get to spring, because that's what we want for you and we love you. And like I said, unknowingly, that spring wouldn't come for her.
Yeah. When someone takes their own life, it sets off an atom bomb in the center of the space that they held, and radiates in a circle to every person they've touched. And it leaves all of these questions, and people start to try to make sense of the narrative of it by trying to recognize the patterns and the things that, this could have gone this way and this could have gone this way, and really tear it apart and try to understand it from that perspective. And I think that while there can be some value in that for trying to prevent something like that happening again, I think that there's also a very, very important conversation to be had about the fact that things went the way that they did, and there's not any value in putting the blame on yourself or the other people around. It's a tragedy that happened, but kind of trying to hurt ourselves or each other doesn't help.
No.
And it's and you really can put yourself in a pretty negative space by trying to take some of that blame, and people will try to take some of that blame as a way of controlling the situation and finding in a very dark way, finding some peace in it, because then they can reconcile it. Now that I know that it's my fault, I'm able to assign some blame somewhere. I'm able to find some peace in it. And of course that's wrong. And this is very fresh for you still. And I appreciate your bravery and your honesty in talking about this. I really do, because I think it matters so much for people to hear these things and to hear these stories about very real people who had very real lives. This isn't just for a subset. I mean, there, but for the grace of God, go I. We're all susceptible to the world around us and the people who touch us, and our own head and our own feelings. So as you start to navigate these things, and you've got young children, how do you have these conversations? How do you have these conversations with your daughter? Was that something that was, I imagine that had to be very difficult to do.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And, when this tragedy occurred, that was the first thing that entered my mind, is how am I going to tell our daughter that, Aunt Gina has died, let alone how she passed. And to be completely honest, Chris, I didn't want to. I told my husband, I said, I don't know if I want to. I don't know how. Again, there's no manual here, especially when it comes to suicide. And how do I tell my daughter? She had just turned 3 in January of that year, and my sister passed away in March. And so how do you tell a 3-year-old that her aunt has died? And it was actually a beautiful story, and I'll share that with you if you don't mind.
Please.
I, again, was wrestling with the idea of telling her, and, do I tell the truth? Do I tell her what happened? And I just really felt strongly like, yes, I need to tell her the truth. I'm not sure how I'm going to tell her, but I need to tell her the truth. And I was in the bathroom, and she came up to me. I would say it was at least a couple days later. It was definitely after my birthday. So the next day. And she came up to me and she says, Mommy, why have you been crying? And I said, honey, I'm just really sad. And she says, why? And I said, well, I said, honey, Aunt Gina has died. And she looked at me and says, why? And I said, honey, she was just really sad. And then she started to smile. And I said, honey, why are you smiling? And, I just told you Aunt Gina has died. Why are you smiling? And she goes, well, does that mean that she's with Grandpa Lanny? And that's my dad. My dad passed away in 2013 from health complications. And I said, yeah, she's with Grandpa Lanny. And she got this big smile on her face, and she said, okay. And she ran out of the bathroom. I was like, okay, that just happened. That went far better than I expected. I have to be honest. I was not prepared for that reaction. But in that moment, it was like this just wash of peace, this wave of peace came over me. And it was like, okay, it's going to be okay. She is in such good company right now that I don't yes, I'm incredibly sad. Everybody's sad. But it brought a lot of peace to know that she wasn't alone. And that in itself, if you've experienced this tragedy yourself, to really grasp hold of that concept that they are not alone, that they are in good company, they are surrounded by friends and family and other loved ones and pets, and they're not, they are in good company. And it's like, oh, okay, I can be sad, I can be mad at times, I can be all these things, but again, just going back to the piece of knowing that she is safe, that she is going to be okay.
I think that children can really frame things in such a way that we tend to overcomplicate all the time.
Oh, absolutely. they have no filter, and that's one of the reasons why I love having little kids at this time is they just say it like it is, and that can be good and bad, but mostly good.
I think it's just incredibly wonderful, and you make a really fantastic point, and this idea that none of us are ever alone, ever, now or after. We are exactly where we need to be when we need to be there. And sometimes things happen that are beyond our control. And the best thing that we can possibly do for ourselves or the people around us is to just love with both arms wide open and just accept things as they come. It's pretty difficult to remain guarded and kind of afraid of things because of what might happen. And heartbreak is a big one. That's a real big one. Conversations around heartbreak and how to manage that and how to soothe that when it happens. I know when I got divorced, I just, one of the first things I did was I got all of the alcohol out of the house because I thought there's no way I'm going to pour more sadness on top of this sadness. It's because I'm not going to make it through it if I do. Right. And it was hard. I got the sickest I've ever been in my life. My body basically gave out. I was in rough shape. And that was a choice. I mean, we had a choice. We could try to stick it out and figure things out, or we could split up and even though the split up was mutual, it's pain. There's a lot of pain because, I mean, I was married for about 10 years. That's a decade of your life with somebody. I have children with this person. It's a difficult thing to manage. Mm-hmm. And I imagine, too, with Gina's kids, that there's a lot of feelings that have got to be reckoned with. And so long as the people in their lives are open to listening when they talk, and that they know that the people in their lives are open to listening when they talk and how they feel, they'll get through it just fine. It's just going to, like you said, it's a season. It's going to take some time. We've all got these things in our lives. And it's just a matter of who are we going to show up as today. And maybe today you show up as the person who gets dressed and goes out into the world. And maybe today you show up as the person who says, I'm going to stay in bed a little bit longer because I need that. And then tomorrow we'll see what happens. As long as you keep getting up, yes, and you keep showing up, that's what matters.
Yeah. And, Simon Sinek, find your why. That's so prevalent, especially after a tragedy like this, that to find your why. And for me, of course, it was my daughter. And not just my daughter, but my whole family. But I didn't realize the gravity of the situation until that morning where she was asking me, why I was crying so badly. And I realized it's not just me. It's not just me. Yeah. And she is looking to me not only for answers, but how did I cope with this? How did I, just handle the loss of my sister? And did I, stay in bed if I needed it? Or did I, on the flip side, did I stay in bed and crumble at the weight of what's happened? Or did I turn it and say, okay, look, if by telling my sister's story, my hope is that you'll see yourself in her story. You'll recognize maybe things about her that you see in yourself, that she can be a mirror to you, and allow yourself to say, okay, I recognize this in myself, and Gina might have felt this way too. And my prayer again is that you would see bits and pieces of your own life in her story and in her life to take action and say, okay, look, I don't have to have it all figured out, but I am going to reach out for help. I am going to, continue to find that hope that we all need.
Well, and one of the things that you've done is you've taken some action in your life. You've decided that this was something that you care about so deeply that you're going to do something with it. So tell me a little bit about the things that you chose to do in the aftermath.
Sure. Yeah, it certainly wasn't easy. I've got to be honest. I fought it for a long time, but I have no doubt it was Gina just pressing on me and saying, no, Crystal, I want you to do this. And I would argue with her. I'd be like, no, I don't want to do this, because it's not a conversation that anybody wants to have, quite frankly. But it wouldn't go away. She is very persistent. And I just kept getting that impression on my heart and on my spirit to start my company, Scattering Hope. And Scattering Hope's mission is to help families heal after losing a loved one to suicide. And while I was navigating that and figuring out, like, okay, this is how I want it to look and feel, I got another download. I got another inclining on my heart to say, okay, Crystal, I also want you to focus on suicide prevention. And I want you to do it in a very loving way that allows people to have the conversation around mental health and around suicide in a very open and gentle way, but ultimately allows them to know that they are loved. Because remembering my own journey and remembering my sister's journey and the interactions that we would have together, because we were very close, especially towards the end, we were very close. And I would just have conversations with her and just letting her know how much she was loved. I could see this visual shift inside of her, this energy shift of when I would tell her, Gina, you are so loved and I love you, and please let me know how I can support you and help you in any way. I noticed that, and I wanted to recreate that same experience for other people, to have that conversation and say, hey, you know what? I see you. And I see that you're struggling, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm here, and, please reach out. Please stay. I'm very, please stay. We need you to stay.
As we're getting out of here, before we do, I wanted to do this. Do you have a particular memory of your sister that you can, it doesn't even have to be anything that makes a lot of sense, but a particular memory that you can tap into where it makes you happy to remember it. Like, what's a good one, if you wouldn't mind sharing just something wonderful?
Yeah. Oh, of course. And I'm happy to share. There's lots of memories of my sister. But I will say the one that I tend to share most frequently, and it also unknowingly was the Christmas before she passed away. I was out Christmas shopping for my family, and I came across this wooden sign. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get that for Gina. And as I shared, I'm the youngest of 8, so there's no way I could buy Christmas presents for my siblings, let alone all their spouses and their children. It would just, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but I saw this and I was like, I have to get this for her. And so it was funny because she was living in my parents' basement at the time. And I went down into the basement and I said, Gina, I got you a Christmas gift. And she's like, what? You got me a Christmas gift? And I was like, I know. We don't typically do these sorts of things because, all of us would be broke if that was the case. But yeah. I saw this and I just immediately thought of you. So I got it. So I gave it to her and she started to cry. And what it says on this beautiful wooden sign is find your happy. And I just took that moment and just expressed to her my feelings and my thoughts. And I just said, Jean, I see you. I just wanted to let you know that I see you. I don't know what it's like to be newly divorced and have your children choose to live with their dad and not even live close to you. And when they are with you, being on their phone or whatever. And I just, newly single and dating and all the complexities that come along with that. And I don't know what that's like, but I just wanted to let you know that I see you. And I made her cry. She did. She started to cry. And it was in that moment that I realized with her that someone finally saw her, like truly saw her, and let alone a family member, like truly like taking the time to say, hey, I see you. And I know it might sound silly, like a little wooden sign that cost me like, I don't know, $7, but the power that I experienced of that moment between her and I, and just acknowledging her and just saying, like, I don't know what this is like, but, please let me know how I can help you, because I do want you to find your happy. And obviously if things were different, I would tell her to please stay and find her reasons for staying, and just remember that it's a season. But for her, like that's a memory that I'll always cherish.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and thanks for talking to me today.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Wasn't that great? I told you, if you stick around to the end, you're going to be rewarded with a great conversation. And I cannot thank her enough for her openness and her gumption to get going and make something out of this tragedy to try to help other people, because that's what it's all about. We're all here to help each other, right? If you want to get some more Crystal in your life, and I know that you do, go to scatteringhope.com. There's links to all of the socials everywhere. You can find her on Instagram. You can actually even get yourself a free healing guide. All you got to do is go and check it out. As for me, please come check me out every Thursday. Go to meetup.com, look for Coffee Over Suicide or coffeeoversuicide.com/talk. And you can be a part of the conversation. But until next week, don't kill yourselves out there.